Hey guys, what's up? It's Schla coming back to ya with another episode of Car Rides with Schla. And today we're not early as much as we want, but we are earlier than we've been all week, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure we're earlier than we've been all week. So I to me that's significant, but really need to start getting it back in gear and cranking the earliness, like really cranking it. Mega early. Like that's really what we need to be doing, and we're obviously not doing that, so it's just not ideal. Just not ideal like at all. But you know, it is what it is. Like I said, at least today we are definitely the earliest we've been all week. I think so, at least, unless my memory's hazy, but at least it's Friday. At least it's Friday. That's all I gotta say. Like, that's good. It's great. We were talking a lot yesterday about something like the nature of yesterday's episode, and then I did actually paste the transcript into GPT, so I did get some sort of obvious pointers around, I don't know, just the things I was saying. It's like, yes, like it's true that someone watching has always been present in like all types of moral kind of structure or motive structure for like a long time, but that's usually this omniscient higher form or being that is like very benevolent and objective about things, objective beyond our own comprehension. And the problem with the surveillance is, well, it is modeling after that. A system is definitely going to be subject to all kinds of glitches, and it's just not going to work out like as evenly or fairly as you would think in theory manifest here. And that does make sense to me, but it's still like I still think part of and the reason why I'm going to push more on it is because it's kind of been taking it all the way back to that first video I decided to make. It's been like my whole thing. It's been my whole thing like this whole time for this series, and what sparked that original idea for that first video, and it was the theory is that introverts aren't a real archetype. It's just that certain people, they're not used to the modern level of like the amount of people you have to socialize with on a modern scale. So the fact that, because like historically, if you socialized, you may only have known a few people. You only knew your family. You only knew your friend. And you and your friend would probably get in fights, but you would likely just eventually resolve it and then still have the same friend. Nowadays, a lot of people, oh, well, I guess you're being toxic, so I'm going to have to find a new friend because I don't like, their bandwidth seems lower. It seems like people are less willing to maintain friendships and would rather just give up on them very haphazardly, and overall less people have those golden friendships that are put on a pedestal as a result of this. Because and I think really the truth is, I don't know. I mean, it could be a combination of things. It could be that people are more rude nowadays. That could have something to do with it, but I don't really think that's the problem. I don't think the problem is that people are more rude, and that, if people were more polite or more reasonable, I mean, to some extent I think that's true, that it's like an issue of a lot of people through modern life. They're extremely spoiled, and even in the 1900s people just were not catered to as much. Even in the 1900s, I mean, not even remotely as catered to. And so a lot of people just had like a healthier situation growing up. Whereas pretty much since the 2000s, I mean, even if you're in poverty, you've likely still happened to have enough free time in at least one point of your life where you had an excessive amount of time on a phone. You were able to like stay up late for a bunch of hours and like really juice up your dopamine, by like staying up on your phone. Even if it's not as frequently, because, living in poverty, you wouldn't have as much free time as somebody in wealth. It's likely that at any point, any person really has been kind of mentally spoiled in a way that the 1900s, if you were in poverty, I mean, maybe you got to watch TV for a little bit, but it's just like, that is no comparison. That doesn't hold a candle to what we have now, So it's super important. It's super important to talk about and mention and point out. You know what I mean? That's like the thing. It just is. It's extremely important. And I noticed GPT not telling me like any of this stuff. And that's why I think it's just, I really wonder what its point is, or where it was getting at with me, because I think this is stuff that's like really relevant to include. But anyway, that's my main point, is like there's a lot of people who are introverts now because since we'll just say since like the 21st century, but I mean, even in the late 20th century, like you could argue these traits were beginning to, if not even fully manifest, but it's really been since I want to argue since like the 2010s that we've really entered like a craziness. But I've already mentioned before how society at large is not constructed for traditional social outlets in any way, shape, or form. Like you go to the food store, and one week there's a certain person working at the cashier, and you get to know them and you're friendly, and then they work there for a couple months, but then they get a new job, and then you never see them again. To me, the amount of times that happens in modern scenarios, it's like too much. It's too much. It's disorganized. I don't think it's moral or correct. Every job should be worth staying at, first and foremost. The fact that they aren't, and people basically have to like play games jumping from job to job, is a huge part of the problem. And it's systemic negligence. It's like we don't have to have things as bad as they are, right? It's just like, but we do because nobody cares. And yeah, I don't know, nobody's setting things up better, and instead you just have a really sloppy system that is not being fairly, yeah. We've talked about this before. kind of trying to be brief because I want to get to what my main point was. But yeah, it's basically, I just don't believe there is an introvert. It's just, what we've actually discovered is extroverts. We've discovered that there are some people who might actually prefer extra socialization. But I don't think as a baseline that's really most people. Or even if it is a person that adheres to an average, we would have never known that before now because we haven't even been hyper socialized until now. So I think you wouldn't really have introverts as manifest if we lived back in, like, an ancient time where you just lived in your town and you never left your town. But then nowadays, again, people, like, they move for all kinds of reasons, and then it's crazy. Like, you don't see people again. And, like, I personally still remember certain people I was friends with in elementary school who moved, and then I never saw them again. And I still, like, especially when I've been reflective with this show and everything, I've thought about certain people that I had known, And I mean, I wonder if they even think about me, because they could even be in, like, a different, because a lot of people don't have the memory or, like, the human care that I do, but a lot of people just forget, move on to the next thing, just the way things go. But yeah, I mean, I've always been more attuned to these kinds of things, and I actually don't remember what the whole point is, like, what we need more of is more permanent social avenues. The problem is everything's short-lived, and that does not create good social behavior. It creates, like, hedonistic social behavior. Oh, you get in an argument with your friend, so now you just go online and find another friend. And, like, that's literally something I think people do. Some people would just do that because they can. A lot of people, it's exploiting, like, a human trait, but it's something that goes on, like, a lot. Like, people are really not loyal to their friends. They're not. There's always sort of this idea that maybe there could be somebody better out there or something, and it's just like this whole conversation. And yeah, it's obviously not good, and we recently talked about how people are not learning proper conflict resolution skills, because these you would usually work through a friendship, and now people just get rid of friendships. They just, oh, well, I guess we're not compatible, and then find, like, a different. But the whole point is most people don't find a different person. I think the problem is that people get catered to so highly that it really inflates the ego to a degree where everybody basically feels like they're a superstar, even though they're not really a superstar. But since you felt that, through, again, like, the severe, and again, even people in people in poverty are likely going to be a little bit more reasonable because they've had to deal with certain things, so they're likely to be, like, less spoiled. But even people in poverty, like, it's pretty cheap to get a phone in this day and age, and so it's very accessible to get a phone. And even though people in poverty typically have less free time, it's likely that at least at some point they're going to be able to use the phone and pretty much maximize dopamine, like, really easily, and that's something that, like, everybody can do now. So everybody gets catered to, everybody gets spoiled. And so you have people who maybe in the past, if they were like, you know, a 10 out of 10 attractive, 10 out of 10 personality, charisma, all those metrics, then nowadays you have somebody who's like completely average, like, I don't know, maybe 6 out of 10 appearance, but their charisma, their personality, it's only like a 4 out of 10. But since they're on TikTok, I think their brain is going to think like they deserve a 10 out of 10 because they're achieving such a high amount of like pleasure so easily and so fast. It's like as if they were one of those golden people, but then when it comes down to it, they don't actually have the social skills or prowess. They're not a superstar. They're not really a celebrity. But everybody feels like a celebrity because now we all kind of are in a way. Like we've all kind of reached that point that a lot of celebrities reach. And so when I talked about in that first video isolation being a luxury, it is. It was never something that wasn't anything anybody was entitled to. And especially in the modern age, it's a luxury. And a lot of people don't see it that way. They get used to isolation and they use it as a way to cope with themselves and all kinds of crazy stuff. They end up in these long stretches of isolation, and that's not natural, human, or normal. You know, the only times you would have been in isolation in the past was for an extremely productive purpose. You know, if you went out to hunt, you were obviously in social isolation. But again, usually you would hunt in groups. So even then, I don't really know when you would be isolated. Like if you're living in a tribe, you're going to have a direct consequence to doing things alone. Right? Like really think about it, because GPT, I don't think you're seeing it at this angle, and you're kind of giving me too much advice just catering to the modern human mind. And it's not, I don't think it's accurate. I'm just going to be honest. Like I think you're catering too much to these artificial precepts that honestly aren't valid. You know, the only validity they have is that they're felt, but when it comes to objective reasoning, they're really not valid. They're just these like, again, they're these artificial precepts that people made up. I don't know. So yeah, the isolation, I mean, in the past, you'd be out of your mind to be isolated. You probably wouldn't survive. It's much more dangerous. There was like an inherent incentive to be social, a survival incentive. Now, in this day and age, there still sort of is. If, you know, with how the rent is now, you basically have to know somebody, you have to roommate with somebody in order to make ends meet. So, obviously, if you get married, you're both better off being together as a result of being separate. You get tax incentive, even though it's relatively small. You get tax incentive, you can split the rent, etc. Now, that's a whole other issue. Then now a lot of times girls are still expecting to be completely provided for, and that just doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like in this day and age, it should be no less than 50-50 equal rent, 50-50 equal, like if you eat out, well, you should just have your own checks. I mean, that's how the world is economically designed. The world is not economically designed for anything other than fairness at this point. Men and women make the same wages, and downstream of that, yeah, if you take someone, nobody's taking anybody on a date. That's the whole thing. Like in the past, that whole concept of taking someone on the date, it's from more of a patriarchal society where a man made more money than a woman. A lot of times women might not even work, and like a man had a car, maybe the woman couldn't even drive. So like the man took the girl on a date. And he paid for it, of course, because there was no expectation that the woman would have money. But nowadays, that's changed, like in a very extreme way. There's been a lot of laws put in place where, you know, that we do have equal wages now. People are making the same amount of money. Men and women are making the same salaries, but there's still some women who are falling back on those primal urges and desires. Those primal urges and desires to just want a man to pay for everything. And it's not everybody, but I've seen it. In my own experience, I've really seen just the amount of people who they're not thinking straight about things. And like I'm always having to like, you know, explain. And I just have absolutely no idea. I really have no idea, you know. But people are still, and they're really firm too about their dream and how their dream is they're just not going to have to work and all this stuff. They're firm about it. And even if I explain to them and show them some kind of data or numbers to say no, in this day and age, it's completely unrealistic to expect that an average man would be able to pay for two people, you know, himself and another person. Completely unreasonable. And people like to, oh no, like it's more possible. Like people do it because they just scroll through TikTok and see stuff. They're not actually looking at data. They're not seeing how much people are struggling in this economy, and it's very frustrating. I have to explain to them it's likely, you know, you'd have to court like the top 10 or 20% richest man, and then even in that case, it's completely possible that the top 10 or 20% richest man, he might not want to date a girl who doesn't want to work. What if he would actually want to date a girl who also has an established career and makes like a reasonable amount of money? I mean, you know, usually men don't care that much about the money, but or as much. I'm not gonna make statements like that because that's not. They don't usually care as much, but it's likely possible that entire 10 to 20% is not just going to reach a hand down and like save again this like completely average woman who just like doesn't want to work and has this dream of just being taken care of in a society where the system is just not set up for that. We are set up for like triple income, honestly. I don't even think a dual income is even enough anymore. You know what I mean? So how do you... I just don't understand. But see, none of these people think about any of this stuff. And they just see things on TikTok. They see people do things on TikTok. They have their dreams, and they're completely unreasonable. Their dreams, their expectations for friendships, for other humans, are inflated beyond belief. And again, I think it has to do with the fact that the degree of spoilage and catering that people and that we see psychologically is so severe and crazy. The only humans in the past who would experience that are like royalty. Whereas now, basically everybody's royalty. Of course, the peasantry, we still have to go to work, and it's kind of rough. But the whole point is, in our free time, you go on a phone and you start watching short form content, and you get like an instant dopamine spike. You get like an instant perfect spike. And it's likely that you had at least achieved the instant spike at some point. because of course that's how it works. I mean, the first time, it really only takes you like the first time of you doing something for it to really hit hard. Like, I'm sure the first time people used TikTok, it was like it really hit hard, and now it doesn't really seem that impressive. But that doesn't change the fact that objectively on paper, you are engaging at like an extremely high, again, like just flooding yourself with dopamine. Even people in poverty can do this, because even like the dirt cheapest smartphones nowadays are actually really fast, really capable. In some ways, some of the cheapest smartphones can even be a little bit more efficient because the CPU is a little bit slower. And yeah, I mean, even people in deep poverty, it's very easy to get. I mean, you're not going to get a flagship phone, but you could easily get a phone that's like the budget CPUs out right now can still haul pretty hard. Like, I don't know, even people in poverty can just hit these extreme. So yeah, I mean, in a way it's like, yeah, because GPT talks about, well, you need isolation to find yourself. First of all, that's only if the human actually does that. Like, GPT is saying how, like, well, you need extra isolation to find yourself and to make certain self-discoveries, but that's kind of a very rosy way of looking at it. I mean, first of all, not even that many people use isolation productively. A lot of times people won't. Like, they're gonna isolate, but they're just gonna blow it on, TikTok. And so how do you, I mean, that's no self-discovery. That's like, if anything, that could be you seeing stuff in an algorithm that now you're into stuff you wouldn't have even naturally have been interested in, but it's because like you've seen it through a screen and through a crazy algorithm. So that's less about like self-discovery and more like external imprinting on your like mind. It's like, it's not really, I don't really know if that is exactly the same thing. To me, self-discovery requires intent. It requires you having to search something up, not an algorithm hand you something that you wouldn't even have liked or ever cared about, but then now you're interested in just because it was flashed in front of your face. To me, that's like, don't say it that straightforward, GPT. Don't say like isolation's good for self-discovery. I think a lot of people blow their isolation. And that's my whole point as to why I don't like that idea. I just think some people should not really be given isolation because they blow it. If they didn't blow it and they actually used the isolate, like even in this example, right now I'm isolated and I'm using the time productively. If people did this with their isolation, I don't think we'd have half of the problems that we have nowadays. If every single person on their car ride to work just did this, just this alone, to this degree, this level of reflection, I think the world would immediately, over the course of just a few weeks, be better off. But that's not how people use their isolation. I bet when people are on their way to work, they're smoking a cigarette, they're stopping by fast food, they're stopping by the gas station to buy cigarettes, they might be buying lottery tickets, they're going to be listening to music, they could be listening to a podcast, they could just be grumbling and complaining. This is not a productive use of isolation. And so I just don't, if people are going to be that ungrateful, why do they deserve stuff? And I know this is where my ideology, it takes a sharp turn, but you have to see things from my perspective. And I'm not saying necessarily what should be. I'm telling you what I feel from my heart. That's not fair. Somebody like me who's actually using the isolation for good and is not just blowing it on a bunch of like brain rot dopamine craziness, somebody like me should probably not have to work as much, you know? I could be doing more theoretical work or cultural study and analysis and things that are good for society but require a lot more mental bandwidth, and as a result of that, you know, I just don't think I should really have to work as much. Now, the thing with that, and I want to make this clear, is that I'm okay with working. Like, I'm able to handle my current job. It's not like, I probably think about quitting my job much less than most people, and I also work more hours and have a longer commute than average. So my commute's longer than average. My hours are like almost 50 hours a week, which is way above average. So like, I'm not coming from this from a place of like, oh, I have to quit the 9 to 5. Oh, I hate the 9 to... No, like, I'm honestly fine with the 9 to 5. I could easily see myself working this job for the rest of my life, and I would be okay with that. Like, I would easily be at peace with this job for the rest of my life. I'm fine with holding the schedule down. I've never missed a day. I've never called out. You know, I've muscled through. I've went to work sick, and I've muscled through that. And that's a level of dependability that is extremely uncommon in my generation. So, yeah, it's like I'm doing a lot. I'm really doing a lot of stuff. So it's not coming from a place of like, I've heard people before making YouTube videos like, oh, I can't imagine myself being a slave like this. I can't deal with the 9 to 5, the grind. Like, I can deal with the grind. It's just, I want to be doing something that's more what I feel up to my mental capabilities, not just some menial job. That's my whole point. And I do think there's genuinely a case to be made. I would be doing better in some kind of a laboratory like I've described before. Maybe this setting where it's a room filled with cameras and microphones, and I'm just talking to AI models all day, like basically doing this level of conversation, but all day. Because the truth is, it does stunt my ability to do this show. Absolutely, it does. It just simply does do that. Like, needing to drive to work. I mean, I'm trying to optimize it as much as possible, because a lot of people, again, they just use their commute as like a very unproductive experience. But still, if I was at home in a studio, like, that would make more sense than being out here on a car having to work. But again, there's a lot of people, and so I'm trying to make that distinction. There's a lot of people who are just lazy, they don't have aspiration, and that's why they're not working, or they're fantasizing about just being able to retire on some chunk of money. I don't want to do that. Like, I want to work. I want to be making meaningful contributions to the world and to society, and I just think that would be either through some kind of a podcast or, again, some kind of a career where, I mean, even like being a therapist or something like that, a psychologist, some kind of like work like that. I'm probably really needed in those fields. Like, somebody with my kind of a mind is needed, because therapists and psychologists, these fields that are incredibly important. It's like over time, more and more people need them. And a lot of times I think what I'd be better at is not really like a stable therapist, but a more like experimental therapist, if that makes any sense. I don't know, because like a lot of times that's kind of how I see myself as. Like, I'd be good at an engineer, but probably like R&D. You know, like being like the engineer, I mean, working with a team of people, but I'd be the one like being able to see or think of ideas that are like newer or fresh or kind of pushing it. And a lot of times my ideas might be misses and may need to be, regulated by more of like an expert. But at the same time, a lot of my ideas I think are hits. I think a lot of times I can see things from a perspective that most people just don't notice or see. Like that's how I am, and I notice this because I talk to people. My mind is very good at seeing like a better way of doing something that isn't, it's not overly but then also sometimes I have a lot of misfires. There's a lot of times like I theorize things and then they don't really land. You know what I mean? Like the things I'm thinking about, they don't land. I don't know how I'm getting to work this fast. This is actually kind of crazy. Like if I get good light luck here, which I guess wow, could I actually... It's still not changing. Oh, never mind. I probably could have made it, but it was a little bit close. I still think, especially if we had made that light, we probably would have made a record for times. That's kind of weird. Maybe I'm driving faster than usual, but I don't really think so. I probably should have just made it through this light, but it's exhausting. Dealing with traffic lights is exhausting when you're somebody who like cares. But it's actually still possible I might break a record, or at least meet a record for like the most optimal time, like the early. I don't know how I got here so fast. I think there was basically like zero traffic this morning, so that's just my assumption as to like, I don't know, but it really got here fast because I didn't really leave all that early. But yep, well, it's good. We kind of did what we wanted. We're getting here like extra early, so yep. But yeah, I don't know that we'll break a record, but we're gonna be near a record. We're definitely way earlier than I thought we'd be. So I guess maybe we left earlier than I thought. But anyways, yeah. That's just my opinion. Like, I think these people on YouTube who are like commentating over a video game play, complaining about how they could never see themselves working 40 hours a year for their life. Like, no, I can see myself doing it. I don't really even have a problem with it. But I don't think that means that that's just what I should do. Like, I think there could be a higher purpose to me. I could be useful. Like I said, within therapy and psychology, you do have to have people kind of pushing the envelope or coming up with new ideas and new ways of handling things. And I feel like I would be one of those people. I think that's like a pretty accurate descriptor, for just who I am and who I would be. I don't know that I'd be like rock solid stable, although once I'm educated, maybe I would be. But I just say, like, in general, a lot of my ideas are a little bit more pushing the envelope, eye-opening as opposed to... They're more pushing the envelope or eye-opening as opposed to just like, oh, this is some stable... Like, I'm thinking about, like, well, how do we do things better? Or, like, how do we, like, pushing, refining, optimizing, which that is not the same as, like, what a lot of psychologists or therapists do. A lot of them are just going to be, like, the same, like, maybe even behind the scenes, like, working on therapy theory, like theoretically what would work in therapy, and kind of like behind the scenes shooting ideas here and there. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's kind of where I see myself. And it probably wouldn't even be like a politician themselves, but again, like working behind the scenes for a politician to come up with some kind of political theory or, the way they portray themselves. You get what I'm saying? Like how to come up with an optimal ideology that it's going to land with voters or it's going to be good for society as a whole. There's that too. So, yeah. Well, it's good. All right. All right. Well, it's going to be that time, guys. It's been schla, but now it's time to buy schla. So, see you, schla.